hey, you guys, look at me doing another book review again already. As regular followers of the show will know, we had a little bit of an issue with our internet where it was pretty much gone all weekend. So we couldn't really do, we couldn't watch anything streaming or anything like that. And I said, well, God damn it, I can still read novels on my phone, and that's what I'm gonna do. So yeah, I took another random spin of the Kindle Unlimited wheel. Round and round she goes. And happily, this time, I got another pretty entertaining read. Now, the weird thing, okay, so, like I said, I usually just pick books at random depending on whatever mood I'm in. I don't usually read the descriptions or anything like that. I'm just like, that kind of sounds cool or whatever, or that looks cool. So I'm not entirely sure why I picked the Paulette Kennedy novel, which came out just a couple months ago, like in March of 2024, which is called The Devil and Mrs. Davenport, over all the other books that it was recommending to me. I think it was something about the title and just whatever mood I happen to be in. And also the cover has this kind of like mid-century suburbia vibe that was very appealing. And I guess it just kind of like piqued my interest. So I'm actually really glad that it did pique my interest, matter of fact, because this was a really engrossing story. I mean, it's very simply written, but it's super, super compelling. And it had like a really good main character that I just, couldn't help but root for like the whole entire time. So in the endnotes, the author, Paulette Kennedy, talks a lot about her inspirations for this novel. And in particular, her love of the work of like Daphne du Maurier and Shirley Jackson. And this book does have kind of a Shirley Jackson-esque tinge to it, although it's framed more like a domestic thriller. I would actually probably call this like a Gothic, in the, classic sense, supernatural thriller rather than a straight horror novel. And it has a couple of vague hints of a romance as well, but don't let that put you off because I hate romances too. And this had a couple of little things that sort of suggested that, but it wasn't like a huge deal, and it actually kind of went along with the story, so I didn't really mind it. At times, it almost kind of reminded me a little bit of Stir of Echoes. I mean, specifically the original Richard Matheson novel from 1958, more than the movie adaptation, which is excellent, by the way, which came out in 1999 and has Kevin Bacon in it. But this is a lot more like the book, being set in the 50s, because I kind of feel like what gave me that vibe was that in the novel, there's a lot of these kind of like status conscious characters, like in this seemingly perfect, like suburban 1950s, neighborhood or whatever. And they kind of cross paths with the paranormal. And then there's like a murder mystery at the center of it all. So it kind of gave me a little bit of that kind of vibe too. But like I said, more the book and not so much the movie, because the movie they changed a lot. But yeah, so this book, The Devil and Mrs. Davenport, I have to say I had a blast with this. You know what I mean? And it's not just because I didn't really have any other entertainment options, because like I said, I couldn't stream. We didn't have any internet for like 2 or 3 days. But yeah, so I really got into this book. Like I was reading it on my phone and I just kept like, didn't want to like put it down. I even actually talked aloud to some of the characters at certain points, which, I do that sometimes. Especially one character in this book that I really, really badly wanted to punch in the dick. I mean, if you've read the novel, I'm sure you know who I'm talking about. I don't know if it's weird that I actually do talk to book characters like sometimes, but honestly, at this point, I'm kind of too old to care about doing weird shit, so I kind of withdraw the question if that's weird or not. But yeah, I'm just sitting there going, oh, you motherfucker, why did look at what he's doing? You know what I mean? It's like, you suck. I was just kind of pointing at the phone, you know what I mean? I don't know if I'm the only person that does that, but oh well, what are you going to do? So as usual, I'm not going to spoil anything about the book outright, especially as it's so new. Like I said, it only came out like last month or something. But I am going to give a fairly extensive rundown of the setup and the plot. So if you'd rather go into this blind, which, that's fine, because that's how I prefer to go into things as well, you might want to read the book first and then come back to this review later, because there's some stuff I'm going to mention that you might not want to know ahead of time. So the writing style of this is pretty basic, pretty unadorned. At times, I'm going to say it had a little bit too much of a tell don't show kind of vibe for me, but honestly I didn't really mind it that much at all. I mean, it was, like I said, it was very simple. It just made the story kind of fly by because you didn't have to like stop and think about what it was saying. It was just, very, very simple. I also felt like the ending was maybe slightly a little bit anticlimactic, but again, that's a pretty minor criticism. And honestly, like through the whole book, I kind of found myself like really, it was really difficult for me to like unglue my eyes from from the phone that I was reading it on until I got to the end. Like I kept, like I'd put it down like to do something else, and then I'd just be like, what? You know what I mean? I'd just be like that, like I gotta see what's gonna happen, you know what I mean? And honestly, like even after it ended, I kind of wanted it to keep going. As I was like looking at the percentage at the bottom, like of how close I was in, it was getting like 89%, 90%. And I was like, oh shit, it's gonna be over soon, and it was kind of like a bummer. So I guess that's like a positive sign because I didn't really want it to be over. So the story is set in 1955 in a fictional small town in the Ozarks that's somewhat based on the author's actual hometown of Springfield, Missouri. So our main protagonist is a 27-year-old housewife named Loretta Davenport, the titular Mrs. Davenport. She's kind of a shy, kind of introverted, kind of dowdy young woman. She's married to this man named Pete, who is like a professor at a Bible college in town called Bethel or something like that. So she met Pete at a tent revival when she was 16 years old. He's several years older than her. And he kind of swept her off her feet, I guess. You know, she's 16. She was kind of naive. Loretta got pregnant and ended up dropping out of high school so that they could get married. So years later, now she's 27, and the couple have two children. They have a son named Luke, who's about 11 or so. He was the one that she was pregnant with when she was a teenager. And they also have a younger daughter named Charlotte, who seemed like she was maybe 7, 8, somewhere around there. I don't remember if she mentioned like how old Charlotte was. So Loretta grew up on a hog farm, and her mom died in a horrible accident when Loretta was 12 years old. And an accident where Loretta was there and she saw it happen. So she saw her mom die. So because of her very rural upbringing, she didn't have, lack of a mother figure. Like in her teenage years, her father was kind of distant and didn't really know how to raise a daughter. And also her truncated education, obviously. She's always kind of had issues with feeling inadequate. Like she feels like she's very homely, that she's kind of backward, that she's never good enough. And she also sometimes feels like she's to blame for things that aren't her fault. So growing up, she always kind of had dreams of like living in a big city and, doing all these glamorous things and stuff. But now, obviously, she's kind of stuck in this very strict, I believe it's Pentecostal household with this husband. And, Pete won't let her work. He won't let her cut her super long hair off. She can't really wear makeup or wear clothes that are flattering or revealing in any way. And she's not really allowed. She's allowed to hang out with other women, but not women, only other like churchy women. You know what I mean? Like nobody who might be like a bad influence. You know what I'm saying? So obviously, like Pete is very concerned with his career at the Bible college. He's trying to get tenure and stuff, and he's very concerned with his image, like projecting this image of perfection. So he's always kind of like admonishing Loretta if she doesn't look or behave exactly the way he wants her to, which is basically like a subservient house mouse type of person. So Loretta, obviously, who has self-esteem issues, kind of feels, again, like everything's her fault. If I can just be the perfect wife, if I can stop messing up, then everything will be perfect and wonderful, and we'll be just as happy as we were, like, in the beginning when we first met when I was 16 years old. So at the very start of the story, Loretta is just kind of on the cusp of recovering from this really bad flu, or some illness of that kind. Now, because Pete is like the quintessential 1950s man and is therefore completely useless at anything having to do with like taking care of the house or, the kids or anything like that, he's kind of been low-key trying to guilt trip Loretta into getting her ass out of bed and getting back to her domestic duties. Loretta is still very sick, but because of his needling, she feels like really ashamed of being lazy and that she's like neglecting her family. So she, against her better judgment, just kind of forces herself to get up and get back to her wifely tasks before she's really fully recovered. Interestingly, though, this flu that she has had seems to have triggered something dormant in her psyche. In that she begins to hear voices and like see random visions. Now, at first, as you would, she just kind of thinks it's like a byproduct of the virus. You know, maybe she has a fever and it's making her hallucinate or something like that. But then she gets a very, very clear and very alarming vision of this 19-year-old girl named Darcy who went missing while walking home from work one night, like, you know, some point not too long ago. Now, this vision is so vivid that Loretta feels like immediately compelled to call the police and report an anonymous tip as to where this girl's body can be found, because that's what she saw in her vision. So long story short, Darcy's remains are indeed discovered exactly where Loretta envisioned that they would be. So Darcy, they find her, she's all busted up, like her leg is broken and various other things, but her cause of death was actually suffocation. It turns out that she was buried alive. So after an incident where Loretta sees what she believes are spirits while another couple is over at the Davenport house, like for a little dinner party or whatever, Pete pretty much insists that she needs to go to the hospital to see what the hell is wrong with her because, you know, he's very image conscious and he's implying that she's being an embarrassment. Everyone is going to think you're crazy. You really have to go get that taken care of. You know what I mean? He's that kind of motherfucker. So while she's at the hospital, she gets a female doctor, unusual in 1955, named Dr. Dixon, and she can't find anything physically wrong with Loretta. But after Loretta tells her about the voices she's been hearing and the visions and stuff, she actually refers Loretta to a psychoanalyst, but not just any psychoanalyst. The doctor, Dr. Dixon, is actually very understanding of Loretta's issues and believes that she's seeing something that she believes is real. So she basically says, this psychoanalyst also has an interest in parapsychology. So she writes out a referral and she says, hey, in case you want to know what's going on, this particular psychoanalyst, whose name is Dr. Curtis Hanson, he's giving a lecture at the library about like metaphysical topics that she might want to check out and see if he's somebody that she might want to talk to. So Loretta, again, as you would be, is completely terrified by all these visions at first. But after she sees kind of a calming vision of her mother, who, like I said, died in a horrible way when she was 12, and also realizes that her daughter Charlotte might also be seeing apparitions like in her room, she starts to think that maybe, because she's very religious, that God has given her this gift in order to help people. Now, she tries to explain this to her fuckstick of a husband, but of course, he is absolutely not having it, basically telling her that she's either crazy or she's being tempted by the devil, because this is some occult shit. Now, Loretta is obviously convinced that this is not the case. She does not think this is a bad thing. She does not think this is from the devil. So she basically sneaks out and goes to the lecture, and she finds out that Dr. Hanson, who she was kind of expecting to be some, you know, old dude with, you know, like fucking glasses and some, you know, just like an old mentor type of figure. But he's actually this kind of young, handsome, you know, dude, and he's really, really open-minded about psychic abilities and paranormal phenomena. So she has some trepidation about it. She's kind of like almost wants to chicken out. But then she calls his office to make an appointment and tells him about the visions that she's been having and tells him about, you know, oh, they found that girl's body, like right where I had the vision and stuff like that. So he's actually very, very interested, and he offers to meet with her for free to see if her abilities are legit. So Dr. Hanson, when she meets him and talks with him, turns out to be a very kind, very warm, very understanding person, the complete opposite, in fact, of the shitheel that Loretta is married to. So she starts to go to sessions every week, kind of on the sly, even though, because obviously Pete has told her not to go. And through her meetings with Dr. Hanson, Loretta starts understanding her gift much more. Like, they start doing tests like, you know, hypnosis, they do like the Zener cards, they do all that kind of stuff. And she apparently has really, really potent like psychic abilities. So he's kind of helping her to foster those. She also starts having visitations from the murdered girl, Darcy, who is trying to communicate with her to get the murder solved. And Loretta also ends up teaming up with Darcy's still living sister, whose name is Dora. And Dora is like really frustrated because the police, even though they found the body, they don't really seem to be making any significant progress. And because she actually starts to believe in Loretta's abilities, like, she asks for her help. So as the events go on, Loretta actually starts to get like a lot more confident in herself and kind of starts to find her own identity because she didn't really have one previously. She starts writing, which is something she always wanted to do, and she even finds like a kind of a sympathetic detective on the police force who actually believes in her abilities. Most of the cops don't, but he actually does, and he wants her to help them solve Darcy's murder as well as an earlier cold case that he had not been able to solve. She ends up making friends with this fun but kind of somewhat unacceptable woman named Gladys. She kind of starts standing up for herself more, and she even gets a job writing like a weekly column for a newspaper. So as Loretta blossoms, it will probably not shock you to know that Pete's very controlling demeanor kind of becomes a lot more restrictive. And he starts trying to kind of crack down on her, what are completely harmless activities. She's just trying to have hobbies and a life of her own and things like that. And he just does not want that. He takes her car away. It's actually both of their cars, but he would usually leave it there for her so she could go grocery shopping and stuff. And he's like, yeah, I'm not doing that anymore. So you can just don't go anywhere. You're not allowed to leave the house. And also kind of has the kind of their busybody neighbor basically spy on her. I think her name is Phyllis. And so Loretta ends up having to lie to Pete more and more to keep from like incurring his wrath, even though she's not doing anything bad. It will also surprise no one, of course, that the hypocritical Pete has many, many secrets of his own. Only the least of which is that he started drinking again after telling Loretta that he'd stopped. So as Loretta's visions start becoming like more urgent, and she kind of feels more motivated to solve the murders and free herself from the constraints of her increasingly abusive husband and like getting her kids away from him because her kids kind of hate him too. Shit starts getting like worse and worse. And since this is 1955, Loretta doesn't really have much recourse when Pete decides he's going to like curtail her freedom in any way that he can, including subjecting her to a deliverance, which is kind of like a violent exorcism where they're kind of basically trying to beat the demon out of her, and having her thrown into an asylum at one point. So as I mentioned, this reads very much like it's a very fast-paced, like a domestic thriller, but with a paranormal angle to it. And the fact that it's set in 1955, which I thought was a great idea, it just kind of gave it that added touch of paranoid horror, you know what I mean? Because Loretta is just thwarted at every turn by what at the time was like really real bullshit. Like, you know, she's a woman, so she's not able to open a bank account on her own. Like her husband would have to co-sign it with her. And obviously she doesn't want that because she's trying to get away from him. And, you know, she never has her needs or her grievances or anything like that like taken seriously. Like everyone just thinks she's crazy or they don't listen to her or whatever. And the religious angle also kind of ratchets the terror up a notch, because Loretta's psychic abilities also become a focal point for, you know, the town's Pentecostal elders or whatever they call them. You know, they can paint her as like demon possessed, and therefore she's not in control of her own thoughts and faculties. And so they can basically do whatever they want to her. So, I mean, stories like this have always been very, very scary to me. And I mean, especially being a woman in this time period would mean that you have just very little to no power, you know, when any of this crap was pulled on you. Like you didn't really have a lot of resources at your disposal. So I felt really, really bad, like for poor Loretta, is she's just like struggling to be her own person and trying to come to terms with this new psychic gift that has come to her. And, you know, and she's just being like beaten down by like everybody around her. And like, I have to say, like at several points during the story, I just kind of wanted to reach through the virtual pages and wring her husband's fucking neck for her. Now, I will say that some of the plot developments in this, I don't think there'll be any great surprise. Like, there's twists, but you can probably see them coming. At least I did. But despite that, this was still a really good, really fast-paced, really compelling kind of thrill ride type of story, of just kind of like gothic suburban religious horror, like in the same vein. I was gonna say kind of like Rosemary's Baby, but slightly, you know what I mean? At least the paranoid thing and kind of everyone working against you type of shit. I especially liked how the paranormal stuff in the story was largely portrayed as positive. The horror actually came from how the closed-minded townsfolk like reacted to it. Like her gift was actually kind of seen as a good thing. Like she was like helping people, and it was just how other people like responded to it that was what was causing the horror. I have to say also, I really enjoyed all of the 50s specific references to Duke's parapsychology lab, which was a real thing that they had. And it's pretty clear that the author, Paulette Kennedy, did a lot of research about like J.B. Ryan and the kind of the vanguard of parapsychological research in that era, because there's like a little bit of that kind of sprinkled throughout the story for added spice, which I thought was kind of cool. So, like I said, if you like Shirley Jackson, or if you like Daphne du Maurier or something like along those lines, and you kind of enjoy stories that are set in that stereotypical 50s suburbia, but like with a dark underbelly type of thing, because I really like those kind of stories, then this will probably be like right up your alley. It does have a whiff of a romance novel about it, slightly, like at points, but I couldn't be too mad at it. And honestly, like as I mentioned before, Loretta was just such a relatable, sympathetic character that you just wanted her to come out of this horrible escalating situation unscathed and end up like finding her happiness at the end, you know what I mean? Now, the ending, as I mentioned, was a touch anticlimactic, I found, and the messaging in the epilogue was a tad on the nose, but overall, this was a really fun, really straightforward kind of gothic paranormal thriller that also had a bit of a murder mystery aspect to it. So, I mean, if that sounds like something that you'd be into, then this is a real good book and you should probably check it out. So that will do it for Tomes of Terror. Hope you guys enjoyed the review. Please remember, like, share, subscribe, and comment, and all of that. And I will see you guys again on the next one. Bye.